Welcome to this edition of the Persecution Report, a podcast dedicated to uncovering the truth behind the current situations in Bangladesh. I'm Professor Bidit today, your host for today's session. Bangladesh, once hailed as a development case study, success story, now faces its most severe economic turbulence in decades. The interim government, led by Muhammad Yunus, installed in August 2024, has received strong criticism for its utter failure in restoring the country's economic conditions. In one of our previous shows, we discussed about the dismal macroeconomic situations in Bangladesh. As we know, the GDP growth of the country, which averaged 6.4% annually between 2013 and 2023, is projected to slump to 3.3% for 2024-25 financial year, making it a 36-year low. Inflation is stubbornly high, close to 9%, with food inflation peaking at 14.1%, squeezing household purchasing power and dampening consumer confidence. The banking industry, plagued by poor governance, has spiraled into a full-blown crisis under the interim administration. Non-performing loans (NPL) skyrocketed to Taka 4.2 trillion by March 2025, pushing the NPL ratio to 24%, way above the international distress benchmark. And it is predicted that some reports suggest that by the end of this year, the default loan will amount to 9 trillion taka, threatening a total systematic collapse. Simultaneously, interest rates have climbed to 16 to 17%. Analysts attribute this meltdown to a toxic mix of political interference, weak regulatory oversight, and Yunus's indecisive reforms, which have neither enforced regulatory discipline nor addressed structural flaws. While all these are happening, we are currently observing dubious efforts to hand over the port to a foreign company without any clarity or transparency. To discuss this issue, we have a panel of experts today. We have Dr. Mamunur Rashid, economist and researcher. We have Dr. Tashfin Hussain, professor of finance. And as my co-host, we have Mr. Anwar Shada Jihan, aerospace engineer and columnist. Viewers, we will start with the last point I mentioned, which is very topical at this moment in Bangladesh, the port issue. First of all, I would like to invite Dr. Hussain to share his thought about this particular issue. Does this government have the mandate to do such deals? Over to you, Dr. Hussain.
Thank you, Professor Bidit. In my opinion, this government absolutely does not have this mandate at all. If you think about it, when this government grabbed the power or was put into power by the vested quarters, this government basically said that they had one agenda to bring certain reforms, certain political reforms and legal reforms, so that the so-called fascism does not come back to the country. And that was their main agenda. In their agenda, there was never any mention about that they are going to make certain decisions which are going to have a huge impact on the economic growth of the country, for example, or more importantly, anything that basically includes looks into the sovereignty of a nation. Now, when you are making this kind of deals, you are giving the authority of the management of the port to the foreign companies. It is absolutely, I would say, audacious act when you are not even an elected government. There is no parliament which is functioning, and you have not discussed this in the parliament, and you have just done that. even if you're an elected government, you are trying to make this kind of deal, you should actually have a discussion in the parliament.
And it relates to local employment. Hundreds of people in that particular region, Chittagong, have got their lives associated with the port. Without representatives from that region, people's representatives, this decision is an absolute criminal act.
Exactly, exactly. And it is an illegal act. And I'm hoping that whoever will get elected, if an election takes place, should actually look into this and really carefully review this. Because a decision like this, which actually includes the not only the livelihoods of so many people, it includes the basic question of sovereignty of a country, that needs to be discussed in the parliament, and there should be a transparent process that needs to be followed. And I want everyone to actually also consider something else. When this decision was taken, the timing of the decision was carefully done or thought about, and this decision was taken when the so-called uh, the, the legal proceedings were going on
The tribunal
against the
verdict.
Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, in this court, which is extremely funny to me, with all their procedures, and the whole country was, in fact, were focusing on that. So this was a very carefully, cleverly done, um, carefully done audacious act, where they knew that most of the people of the country would not be focusing on this. They would be really interested what kind of verdict that the court will give against Sheikh Hasina. And they were glued their eyes on the TV, on the other kind of news media. And very quietly, this was done. So you can see from that angle that what's the real intention, because this government basically knows that they do not have the authority to do that. If they do that in any other time, there will be lots of criticisms, there will be lots of discussions, people will start to think about it more. So let's time it in a way so that actually people are really focused on something else.
Great. Also, I'd like to ask your opinion about the reason that there is no virtual opposition right now, because Mohammed Yunus is just acting like a total control of everything, and he is not opposed by anyone. The media is completely muzzled. So, do you think he's also making an opportunity, making a use of the situation to do this sort of dubious deals?
I think I have said that before in your show, that Dr. Yunus came to power with an agenda, and he has certain agenda that he needs to ensure that those are carried out, and these are serving the interests of um, religious extremists, and also the interests of some other countries and other interest groups, which do not belong to any country necessarily, which are global interest groups. So he knows that whatever time he has to basically make sure that all those agendas are do become a reality, and they are not going to be reversed anymore. So, of course, that to do that, you have to behave, or you have to be um, you have to behave in an authoritarian way, and that's exactly what he's doing. And to make sure he's making sure that nobody can question all the things that he will be doing, all the illegal things that he will be doing, all the things that he will be doing, which will which will hurt Bangladesh in decades to come, but will serve the interests of himself and all those groups that have put him to power through a huge, carefully orchestrated conspiracy. So you have to be uh, authoritarian in nature to make sure that you are able to um, complete your agenda that you have in mind.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Hussain. That's very insightful. Dr. Rashid, we understand that there is no clarity about this particular deal. There has been an NDA signed, that's what we have been told, non-disclosure agreement. And also we understand that the port not necessarily is inefficient or cost incurring concern. What's your take about that?
Thank you, Dr. Day. Can you hear me? I think you can hear me, right?
Yes, we
Yeah.
can hear you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Let me start with the last point that you finished with, is the legitimacy of the decision that we are quite cautious about. Let me start with a very simple statement. What is the purpose of a port? A port is, in general term, this is to facilitate transfer of goods and services. Now, if you are intentionally destroying your relationship with the neighbors, and if you just for a moment imagine the geographic differences that we have in the Chittagong area compared to, say, for example, Singapore, you'll clearly understand that the purpose of a port or seaport for us, despite having a very bad relationship in the recent years with our neighbors, will only serve purpose of something dubious other than having a trade relationship. So if you are planning to bypass, for example, other greater ports in the nearby region, including Malaysia and Singapore, then you might be thinking that, well, Chittagong port or other ports are quite important. But the main intention, obviously, in the near future is to use these ports to trade or to ship goods and services to, for example, to the eastern part of India, for example. Now, if you have a bad relationship to start with the neighbors, then definitely there are other reasons for which you are intending um, to give the port to somebody else. Then comes the point of, for example, the um, hiding the entire process that that we are currently trying to highlight. My simple question is, if it is for public benefit, why we need to hide it from the people? If I'm saying in a simple word that this is for public benefit because there are a lot of corruption going on in the existing port management, and even though our ports were profitable, there is a common saying, or there is a propaganda that has been created, I believe, by the opposite quarters, that our ports are corrupted, or administration is corrupted. If that is the case, if it is for the benefit of the public, why we need to hide it from the public? Why there is the NDA on the non-disclosure agreement signed? Why the people cannot see it? Okay. Now come to the issue of, for example, how much money we are actually going to get from this. A few $100 million. That's a sign of money plus some investment that they are going to bring in. Interestingly, yesterday in a show, I participated with one of our former MP, and he mentioned that actually the infrastructure of most of these ports are there. You don't need to bring in anything. Most of the infrastructures are there already. So the amount of money that you are giving to us as sign up money, you never know where the money is going into, whose pocket or whose bank account. The highest FDI in the history of Bangladesh that we have received in 2018 was $3.61 billion. That was the highest, not in percentage wise, but in stock wise, the value wise. Now you compare this to few $100 million that you are going to receive, or few hundred crores of taka, for which you are giving away your most strategic resource, according to Yunus, that our port is the most strategic resource now. If you are giving away this to someone else without the mandate, it's really questionable. and dubious. Now come to the cost issue. Um, we have few information. I mean, we do not have clear information since they are not disclosing anything. But we know now that the cost for the port is going to increase by at least 40%. So it means that, what currently we are offering, we are not losing money, and then there will be additional 40% cost. Plus, there is a tax rebate given to these companies for the next 10 years. For the next 10 years, the government's revenue from this port, which is one of our major income for the government from the port for the next 10 years, going to be zero. Also, there is another issue, perhaps you have seen it today, that there is a cost of energy increasing by almost 83 to 84%, I think. I think yesterday's information. Cost of gas, I think, is increasing again. So this is going to affect, obviously, trade, production, and that is going to affect the shipment as well. So if you are closing other parts of or factors of production and intentionally damaging them, what is going to have, or what is the impact that in terms of size on the consumers is unimaginable. There has been an estimate, but this estimate is still not critically analyzed. But there has been an estimate that the cost on the consumers for each unit of 20 TEUs for this shipment or these ports will increase significantly, meaning that the consumers will be paying additional cost unnecessarily, without any reason at all. Then comes ultimately the issue of sovereignty, issue of losing control, and then other risk issues that will be coming in the future.
And amongst those other risk issues, may I also highlight one point, that what sort of message does it convey to our international partners, business partners, international communities? So do you think that the international investors will feel much more hesitant after this deal, that they may consider that this country is not transparent enough, and this country has got a lot of dubious issues brewing inside, bubbling under the surface?
As I understand that, if you are intentionally destroying factors of production, you are not looking into using this port for anything useful. I mean, we shouldn't suspect it, but there have been news that there are shipments coming from Pakistan. Those are not being checked. Now, if the ports are given to foreign authorities for operation, what kind of control you have on those shipments coming from other countries? Whether there have been given any blank checks to anyone to import anything or to carry anything using your ports, you never know. Meaning that we are easily in the position of suspecting that in the near future the entire South Asia, possibly extended Southeast Asia, will be completely volatile because of these ports given to these international authorities without proper mandate. Another issue, you have seen that one of the ports are actually in the heart of Dhaka, the port that is, I think, one of the ports given. So meaning that these machineries, whatever is going to be carried in the future, can easily come to Dhaka, and your capital of a country might be sabotaged, by using the instruments that they will be carrying without even notifying the authorities, because they are given those rights, and we do not know what kind of rights given to them for the next 30 years, an extended period of another 15 years. So just imagine, for the next 50 years or so, you have no control on the number one strategic resource of your country.
But
And the
Dr.
decision
Rashid,
has
I
been
have a
made
question.
by.
I have a quick question. Dr. Rashid, what do you think about the legality of this deal? Will this deal sustain in the future after a democratically elected government comes, or these deals may be challenged in an international court and fall apart?
Well, we have seen so many examples of similar deals, being taken to international court. But you should understand, and the people of Bangladesh should understand that the authorities, those are, or the business organizations, those are taking part in these deals. They are quite powerful. They are international. They are global organizations, and they know about these risks. They know that this government doesn't have any legal mandate. So that means they have calculated their risk coming into this position, and they know that the trade scenario is not increasing for them to, convincingly increase the value of their own shareholders. So something is happening, outside of the book that we do not know. So legal scenario obviously is going to be very risky for these companies, and I'm sure that they are ready for it. But they should know, at least through this show, we should tell them clearly that the people of Bangladesh do not agree with this deal, and what you are doing currently is risky. And if in the future, if there's a political repercussion, if there's a legal issue, we will be with the people of Bangladesh. We will be supporting the government of Bangladesh, not you, because you have a formally established country risk analysis department with your top managements and top companies. You know the risk that you are taking. You should be doing calculative risk.
And you should be held responsible and accountable for a deeply unpopular decision made by a government who only is there for 13 months, and no one knows how long they will be there for. And they have made a deal for 30 years. That's quite an unprecedented issue. And that's why you can see that there are so many questions and criticism about the current regime. So may I request Mr. Jihan to take us through the investment scenario, because port is inextricably connected with the country's investment, both local and foreign investment. Over to you, Mr. Jihan.
Thank you, Professor Day, for inviting me today. It is always an honor to be on the same platform as Dr. Rashid and Dr. Hussein. Now, suppose you are lying motionless in a railway track and a train is approaching very quick, very fast. No matter how much you try to deceive yourself and others, no matter how much you lie, it is not going to help you. The train will just cut right over you. The investment scenario of Bangladesh is exactly like that. The current unconstitutional regime is resorting to deceit and lies, while the whole economic machineries, the investment climate is in a free fall, like this picture. But in this picture, this guy has a parachute, right? But for the case of Bangladesh and its investment climate right now, there is no parachute. It is only downhill. It is going downhill. If we take a look at the FDI inflows in Bangladesh for the last 10, 12 years, we will see that the yearly FDI was always above the $2 billion mark, even during the harsh time of COVID. Even though it took a bad hit, it was still above the $2 billion mark. But then the August happened, Sheikh Hasina was removed from power, and the FDI took a sharp nosedive, and it fell down to about $1.27 billion in 2024. Political uncertainties, inconsistent regulatory policies, cancellation of major infrastructure and energy projects, and most importantly, the loss of bilateral and multilateral trust. All these are causing serious harm to our FDI in Bangladesh. Even though there is a modest uptick here and there, primarily from the foreign loans that are coming in, there is no positive picture for the foreign investment. Now, foreign investment in South Asia, if we look at the South Asian countries such as India, Nepal, foreign investment are only a small part of the total investment. So local investment is very important. If we look at the local investment scenario in Bangladesh, there is nothing, because factories are closing, people are losing jobs, there is no production. No investors are feeling safe to invest in this climate. And it is quite understandable and logical. If we look at the startup ecosystem of Bangladesh, we will see a similar scenario. In 2023, the total investment in the startup was about $72 million, of which $36 million was local investment. And it took a 95% hit. Last year, it was only 1 million. Nobody is investing. And whatever the Awami League government did to encourage the youth to be entrepreneurial are going down the drain. There is nothing in the startup sections. We have seen so many startups like Pathao, Shahoj, and all that became a reality during the Awami League period. But right now, there is nothing. Besides all this, because the energy is also tied to the investment, right? If we don't have adequate energy, there is no adequate production. So Bangladesh is taking hit in energy sectors as well for its overly excessive reliance on imported LNG. We are seeing diplomatic mishap by the unconstitutional Yunus regime with the neighboring India. So the Adani group is also having some coalition, who is a major energy provider to Bangladesh. Why the foreign investment scenario is like that? The Awami League government has undertaken many major development projects, which became reality during the time of the Awami League government, such as the Padma Bridge, so many flyovers, elevated expressway, and an important project was the Rupur power plant. What we are seeing from this government is that they are discouraging the activities of these major projects. So while they are not giving enough attention to these projects, investments on these projects are not coming in. And then, while all this is happening, we are seeing a trend like at the very beginning that I had mentioned, that deceit, lie. This unconstitutional regime is based on lies. They're surviving based on their lies and deceit. The Bangladesh Investment Development Authority, an authority that was formed by the Awami League to attract foreign investors, they are openly lying and providing misinformation and disinformation to the national people and the international people. For example, Biden, right after coming to power, has made a blatant lie, which is that they supposedly inked some deal with the US government. But there was no deal with the US government. It was with a US company. So when you are lying to this level, I don't know, like, is this deceit or what? Then this same Biden, same unconstitutional government, they lied about Samsung's investment to Bangladesh. They lied that the Awami League government prevented Samsung from investing in Bangladesh, investing $22 billion in Bangladesh, which is another lie. If we look at the numbers of that year, the overall investments of Samsung was about $40 billion. And this guy is claiming that out of this $22 billion was for Bangladesh, which is a complete lie. So when the government, according to Navy SEAL Commander Jocko Willink, US Navy SEAL Commander Jocko Willink, the responsibility of failure of any team lies on the shoulder of the leader. So whatever we are seeing in Bangladesh, the failure in the investment climate and all that, if this government was really willing to do something good for Bangladesh, and if they really meant something good for Bangladesh, they would have taken responsibility, not lie. So,
Thank you.
Back to you, Professor Day.
Thank you, Mr. Rehan. Dr. Rashid, we have learnt about some statistics, some figures, including the current scenario with the FDI. Despite a lot of huffing and puffing by Yunus and his cronies and minions, we do not see any significant rise in the FDI. And also we can see that the infrastructural deficiencies and flaws are still there. So I know you have been doing an extensive research on the current economic climate. Could you please shed some light on this?
Thank you. Let me add some information to this. The information that I couldn't give you in clear sense is that due to the port that we are giving to other people, the consumer cost will increase by at least $45 to $100. In recent years, I think it's information of only a month ago, the development budget of the government was decreased by, I think, nearly about 30,000 crore taka, meaning that many of these infrastructure investments will be closed. As you perhaps now know that number of our metro rail extension projects are now withheld. Several other infrastructure projects are now withheld. And social development activities also, including schools and other activities, are also currently withheld. Um, about the investments scenarios, as you know, and we will be talking about this most probably, is that the financing of the investment is also currently in trouble. There has been a significant reduction of private sector credit. The last month it was the lowest in the last 4 years, and when they are also comparing this to only the COVID-19 period, which is again not a good time to compare with. So it is going down. There has been some progress with import, but then import again started decreasing, meaning that our industrial machinery that was needed for investments and also for production are also taking a big hit. Treasury bill rate recently increased, even it crossed 10% rate. It's quite significant, meaning that if your basic rate increases, your risk-free rate increases, then it is not possible for any bank to lend money to private sector below 17-18% rate. So if your industrial rate is 17-18%, consumer rate goes up even by another 3-4%. So overall, these activities or shortage of funds or lack of focus, you can say lack of strategic foresight, eventually affecting Bangladesh's investment, and it is giving a signal. It's giving a negative signal to the foreigners. It's giving a negative signal to international investors that this country possibly have lost its vision. It doesn't have a vision currently, and we should be withholding investments, whatever the planning that we have. As you perhaps seen that IMF recently mentioned clearly that we are not going to release the last part of the loan contract that IMF was supposed to give us. It's because they are waiting for a government, an elected government, because IMF also cannot see any light down the tunnel. So therefore, international investors, when they're planning to invest in your country, they do not see any clear vision from this government. Yeah, Professor Day.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rashid. Dr. Hussain, there are a couple of things that we can pick from Mr. Jihan's presentation. One is the local SMEs and startups are suffering from a lack of conducive or available ecosystem, which is extremely critical, vital for industrial development, particularly for SMEs. And that is kind of a lifeblood of a developing country's economy. And that has been severely affected. On the other hand, we can also see the continuous effort of fabrication and misinformation. So when they are unable to do the right work, they're resorting to misinformation. All the spin doctors of Yunus regime are coming en masse to spin it around and trying to create a rosy picture. How do you see that at one side people are experiencing from their day-to-day lived experience, on the other hand the government is trying to create a different picture? How do you see the political dynamics with the economic situation here?
Thank you. As I said, it's about fulfilling their agenda, right? Because as we have just heard the discussion from Anwar, Sadat, and Dr. Mamoon. One thing is very clear, and that thing is that our financial system is not working properly, right? Now, foreign direct investment is important, but what is equally important is you have to have a financial system that is working well. So, because if that financial system is not working well, that is going to ultimately impact and harm the economic growth. And that is exactly what's happening. If you are a government, whether you are an interim government or whether you are an elected government, whatever, or you are an unconstitutional government, but you are, a government right now which is governing this country, your primary goal at this point is to ensure that the basic system that was in place still works, correct? So regardless of the corruption charges that we can bring against or we can talk about against our government, regardless of the so-called fascist nature of the government, one thing is very true, and we have seen from the data that our financial system was strong, it was working well, and there was a lot of investments in terms of the infrastructure development. That has been totally stalled. So because that has been stalled, this government has failed to do its primary or very basic responsibility, that the financial system works well, at least the way it was working before. If we cannot improve it, it's fine. So that all those SMEs that were coming up in Bangladesh, all the young entrepreneurs that were getting interested to start their startup projects, that we can continue that trend. So that basically means that this is a big failure because their agenda is not about maintaining this at all. And that again, this proves that their agenda is not about, continuing the economic progress that we have seen in last 15, 20 years. Their agenda is completely different. So rather than putting your energy, your focus into seeing that what's wrong with the financial system, why it's not doing what it's supposed to do, why our foreign direct investment is going down, why there is no local investment, why companies have to take loan in such a huge rate, what can we do about it? They are making shadow deals in terms of the poor. So that's the political implication.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hussain. And also, may I add to that is that one of the key components of the of a thriving and supportive ecosystem is a stable financial sector, banking sector, easily available loans, as well as political stability. So we have talked a lot about political stability, and I'm sure by now, not just people in Bangladesh, everyone around the world who have been following Bangladesh for the last 15 months, they know that the political stability is at the rock bottom ever. I mean, we couldn't think about such a crisis situation ever in the history of Bangladesh. But also, which is very important and very much pertinent to today's discussion, is the financial sector, the banking sector. So now I would like to invite Dr. Rashid to tell us about that what we see about the banking sector in general, and then I'll go to Dr. Hussain to learn more about, as a finance expert, about the implications of the current scenario. Over to you, Dr. Rashid.
Thank you. I will leave it for Professor Tafshin to later come and connect finance and economic growth, as he has better experience in there. Let me give you some data so that we can later critically analyze this. If you remember, 15 years of propaganda against the banking sector of Bangladesh, that it's going down, going down. We haven't seen so many banks in trouble at the same time during Sheikh Hasina's 2009 until 2024 time period. As we know now that there has been 8 to 9 folds growth of deposit and loans during Sheikh Hasina's 15 years. The average growth of deposit and loans were in the range of 14 to 15%. Now, these definitely have significantly contributed to private sector growth, SME growth, and all others. Now, what we have is 24 banks now in trouble. At the beginning of U.S. government, the Yunus government taking over in August 2024, they took the reform project. Now, anyone can question the reform project because if your economy is in trouble, financial sector is mostly a derivative sector. So before running a useful reform on your economy, why are you running a reform on your banking sector? Because it's going to fail. If your economy doesn't survive, your banking sector is not going to survive. I will give you some statistics now to you. They have pretty much, they have hidden it from the people when the NPL went up by almost 8 times, the non-performing loans. And if I emphasize on this, in the 50 years from our independence, whatever you had in terms of NPL altogether from all governments, Yunus government major contribution to this banking sector, first of all, is the NPL increased by over 8 times in a span of 15 months, 14 months. Now, interest rate also went up. Now, the reason why interest rate went up is Yunus government did not tell us that they were also under the table, well, obviously legally, but without telling the people, they were borrowing significantly from the financial sector, which we have seen recently from one of the reports. I will tell you in a short while. So as a result, there was a shortage of fund for private sector that eventually led to the increase in interest rate significantly from almost weighted average rate of 8% went up to 16, 17%, for which many good companies, those were attacked with some mob activities and others, they could not reschedule their loans because the new rates now go up to almost 17%. At the same time, the credit to private sector significantly dropped because the real economic and production activities halted. The report that I was referring to about banking sector is that um, most of the top banks, those are currently making good profit, including Citi, Bragg, and others. If you look at their reports, you'll find that in the last 1 year, they have made significant amount of profit. But the catch is this profit, well over 100%, came from non-banking activities, meaning that these profit actually came from lending money to the government at a very high rate. So as you know, that treasury bill rate is 10%. So treasury bond rate would be definitely more than 10%. So banks found it quite useful, profitable to lend it to the government rather than finding a consumer or customer from the industrial sector, because the industrial sector is destroyed. At the same time, this is also part of the report that for the same banks, those are most successful bank, have seen their regular income from interest income, that regular banking activity, decrease by over 100%. Meaning
On
that
that note, Dr. Rashid, just to, I've got a curious question. I'm being curious, not an expert in this area, that what are the implications on the economy, particularly on inflation, of such reckless public sector borrowing?
well, if your interest rate is high, amazingly, they are cousins. Inflation rate would be high too. So even if you want to hide it from me, I know because I know economics. So even if you are saying that we are managing it nicely, IMF recently said that you have failed. Bangladesh government have failed in managing their inflation rate, in containing their inflation rate. So if the interest rate goes up from 8% to 16%, and if you are still telling me that my inflation rate is 8%, I don't trust it. If your inflation rate is 8%, why your treasury bill rate is only 10%? Or why it was 7% previously? But the most important impact which we are missing here is if our banks and 24 banks currently having capital shortage, plus top banks are earning money from borrowing, lending the government. The next thing that we are missing is when the government stop borrowing, and if the government is technically bankrupt, for example, these top banks will be bankrupt too. Because for the last 1 year, they have completely forgotten how to give loans to industries. So this is the problem when you intentionally destroy industries, you basically are destroying the entire chain of financial system. Okay, now let me take you briefly and quickly to the two other parts of the financial systems that we have. The security section, as you know, the stock market and the bond market, the market value dropped fairly by 50% or more than 50% over the last 15 months. Now, can you imagine a country, an emerging country, losing their stock market value by 50%? Half of the market value has wiped out, has been wiped out by this massive economic crisis. That means it is affecting the small farms, it's affecting small investors as well. There have been reports from Securities and Exchange Commission that small investors actually went out of the market in massive quantity. More than 80,000 BO accounts, beneficiaries of owners account, were closed. The rich investors are still in the market. Those are basically taking the advantage of the market volatility. Small investors went out of the market. The last part is non-bank financial institutions. There are 10 non-bank financial institutions that are currently in the process of closure. These are planned by the current government. Interestingly, they are also trying to privatize Nogod, one of our payment system, and they are giving it to private sector despite Nogod being one of the successful project and the number one competitor to bKash. Nogod had 75 million customers. I don't know for what reason a government-owned company has to be privatized when it is profitable. And finally, even though banking sector is in trouble, they are saying that there are 25 banks, those are in trouble. We are having a lot of crises managing our banks. Why then you are giving another 12 licenses to digital banks? Is this the right time to do it? Do you have the mandate to give license to new banks? Back to you, Professor Day.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rashid. Before I go to Dr. Hussain, I've got one more question. It's about, you mentioned about the high interest rates. And also we can see that there is a lot of increase in the intra-company transfer between for multinational companies. So rather than repatriating their profit, they are choosing to reinvest within the country, and which is being shown as an increase in the FDI. So could you please explain this relationship for our viewers?
Normally, foreign companies in Bangladesh do not have any withholding tax. To simplify this, when you are transferring your revenues every year back to your mother company, some countries apply some withholding tax, say 5 or 10%, and then remaining 95% you can transfer back to your home country. Bangladesh doesn't have any withholding tax, meaning that 100% of your money you can transfer back to your mother company, given that the foreign currency rate is favorable. Now, when is the foreign currency rate favorable? If you are buying dollar, for example, to transfer the money back to your home country, you definitely want to buy the dollar at a cheaper rate. That means Bangladeshi taka has to be stronger against the dollar to send the money back, which was not the case. So foreign companies should not send their money back at this time. On the other hand, can they borrow from local market in order to finance their company operation? They couldn't, because the interest rate now goes back to, goes up back from 8% to 16, 17%. So it's no way financially favorable for them to raise it from the local market to finance their operation. And then there is economic crisis, for which many of these multinational companies have seen their profit went down. So the only probable or possible cause behind this intra-company transfer is that when the local subsidiary need money, the mother company will have to transfer money from outside. And that is beneficial for them right now to bring money into Bangladesh rather than transferring money from Bangladesh to outside because of the foreign currency rate. So the FDI that were shown by the Yunus regime that there has been increase in FDI because of intra-company loan. This is because of their strategic failure, because of higher interest rate. I cannot borrow from the local market. That's why I'm bringing money from outside into the country. There is no way you can take credit for this. Back to you, Professor Day.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rashid. Of course, these multinational companies, they know about their business better than many other people who do. And of course, they are doing everything that serves their purpose and their interest. Dr. Hussain, in the whole financial climate, and the economic climate, what Dr. Rashid has explained, and the situation in the banking sector, where do you see the overall the policy of this government? Do you see that the government is acting with a strategy, with whatever the reform promise they made? Do you see that those are happening at all?
Thank you. I do not think this government has any strategy in terms of ensuring that that we have a prudent financial system. As I said, that I believe the only strategy that this government has is to make sure that Awami League cannot participate in the next election. And the second strategy that they have is to ensure that some of their agendas, which are, as I said, which have lots of international interests built into that, some of those agendas take place, right? I just want to start with something that Dr. Mamoon mentioned, and I want everybody to understand that. He made a very good point about the T-bill rates. So the T-bill rates right now, if I'm not mistaken, what Mamoon said is about 10% or something. And the T-bond rates are also around that spectrum. Do you know the T-bill rates or the T-bond rates of countries like US, UK, Canada, or some of these developed countries? It's very low. It's about anywhere from 1.5 to 3%. At a max, it can go to 3.5%. Now, this is what we call risk-free rate. Why? Because government is borrowing and the government is expected not to default. Anytime a company or even me, right, when we are taking a loan, of course, there is some risk. The risk is we are not going to be able to pay back the loan, right? So the financial institution which is giving us the loan, they are going to actually ask for a compensation for taking that additional risk. So the interest rate is determined based on that risk-free rate, what the government is paying, plus some kind of extra compensation. So already, if the risk-free rate is about 10%, that's what Mamoon said, then you can see that at what rate companies are going to be able to borrow, 16, 17%. Now, in a very layman terms, how the financial institutions work. At any point in the economy, there are people like us, some of us, who have more money than we are going to consume. And there are some of us who have more consumption needs than what we have. So those who have more money than that they will consume are called net savers. And those are deposited in financial institutions, right? Then what financial institutions do is they repackage all of the money from the net savers in different kind of loans, and then give these loans to the companies and also consumers, right? So right now, there are several things that are happening. As some banks are having problems, that means they are not having enough funds. So they are not getting enough deposits, right? So if I do not have enough deposits, how can I give loans? Number two, those which actually have enough net saver funds, when they are trying to give loans to these companies are not taking loans, and because of two reasons. Number one, the interest rate is high. Number two, they do not foresee that they can undertake a project where the return of the project can be higher than the cost of the debt. So they are not undertaking the project. You are killing your economic growth. Number three, Dr. Mamun said that government borrowed a lot. And this is what we call a crowding out effect, right, Dr. Mamun? So when this crowding out effect is happening, already you have very little money for the companies to borrow. So the companies are not able to borrow, because even if they want to invest in profitable projects, the net present value of those projects are becoming negative because of the high cost of capital. Whatever money is there, the government, the Yunus regime, is borrowing this money, and God knows what they're doing with that, right? And rather than bringing that financial discipline, you are giving what's your basic big achievement is that, hey, we have given port to some foreign companies so that it is going to help the economic growth. You have already killed any prospect of economic growth. Now, the other thing is why these companies, whether it's local companies or multinational companies, are not going to make the investments, or why these investments are slowing down. One of the reasons is all of the infrastructure project has stopped. I'm sure that you have heard this from the recently elected Prime Minister of Canada. In his election campaign, he made a promise called Build, Baby, Build. He basically meant that the Canadian government is going to undertake huge infrastructure projects so that the Canadian companies are going to become less reliant on US because of all the tariff and all that stuff that is going on. This is Canada. It's a mature economy, and we are saying build, baby, build. In Bangladesh, we are saying stop, baby, stop, and give, baby, give. That's what we are doing in Bangladesh.
Deal, baby, deal. All the dubious
or
deals.
deal, baby, deal. So in conclusion, what I'm going to say is you have destroyed the financial system pretty much. How can you expect economic growth when you have already pretty much made the financial institutions paralyzed?
Thank you very much, Dr. Hussain. That's very, very thoughtful and insightful. I feel like I'm in a finance lecture, right? Great. It's very much enlightening. I'm sure the audience will enjoy this fascinating discussion. Dear viewers, while Yunus's administration touts recovery narratives and tries to paint a rosy picture of the situation, from our panelists, what you have seen now is that the picture remains bleak. I'm sure ordinary people, businesses, and bankers will concur with their concerns, as these individuals, these people, are having real life, day-to-day lived experience with inflationary pressure, currency depreciation, and eroding institutional integrity, which all have been highlighted in today's discussion. If you are a foreign investor, would you consider this as a viable, attractive destination? Bangladesh, I mean, where mobs rule, where religious militants dictate, and OPEC trade deals are done without following international standards. It's just Mr. Yunus and his cronies are trying to deny the facts, but the rest of the people, rest of the country are not. And what we can feel is that, and what already our panelists have mentioned, that wrong policies at the wrong time have aggravated liquidity shortages and stifled growth. Far from ushering in stability, the Yunus era has pushed the country to an absolute chaos, leaving the country teetering between reform rhetoric and looming financial collapse. Stay well, stay safe, stay informed. I am Bidit Day, signing off until we meet next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.